LP Vidyardhi's approach has a certain unique elements. This is not about a tribe, not about a village, but about the total. The totality of Indian civilization. It is in terms of how the civilization is produced, how there is an interaction across groups. So this attempts to explain cultural continuity in terms of time, in terms of space. Okay. So this gives a different approach to the study of Indian society. How did LP Vidyardhi come to this particular approach? It is because his exposure is different. He came under the influence of American School of Anthropology. His teacher was Robert Redfield. He did MA in anthropology. LP Vidyardhi did MA in anthropology from Lucknow. Then he went to do doctorate from Chicago University, where he studied under Redfield. It was Redfield who gave this approach to LP Vidyardhi. So what is the approach? Redfield thought in terms of great tradition and little tradition. He employed these concepts in his study of Mexican communities, which is published as Peasant Society and Culture in 1956. So he first proposed the idea of GT and LT, something major, mainstream, and something small and local. Okay. This idea of Redfield is applied in the Indian context by McKim Marriott and Milton Singer. Okay. Before discussing LP Vidyardhi, let us discuss application of great tradition and little tradition in Indian context. Great tradition refers to urban, educated and elite traditions. Saraswati called them Shastriya traditions, transmitted through texts. Whereas little traditions refer to traditions of like religio magic practices, customs coming from tribes, villages, like that. So basically, American school thought of GT and LT, or GC, great community, and LC, little communities, and how the culture is being transmitted across. So thinking in terms of two categories and transmission, and extending it, Mikem Marriott, who is also a student of Redfield, used these words of universalization and parochialization. Universalization refers to carrying forward of materials which are already present in the little tradition. Little tradition to great tradition is universalization. And parochialization refers to downward devolution of great tradition elements and their integration with the little tradition element, a process of localization. Is it? He applied these concepts in his field work in Kishanghari, UP. So his approach is historical and cultural. Essentially, all these concepts put together, GT, LT, GC, LC, UP, put together, explain cultural transmission, influence, because of which unity is produced. And it not only explains how the unity is produced, but it also dividing it into exactly two, great versus little. And of course, one can criticize why one should think in terms of only two. For example, S.C. Dubé said we can think of Indian tradition in terms of more number of traditions. Classical tradition, regional tradition, Western tradition, emergent national tradition, and subcultural traditions of specific groups like Jamindars and bureaucracy. So S.C. Dubé says that why should we think only in terms of great and little, but why can't we think in terms of more number of traditions? And of course, there is no end to the number, and there can be more. But the point is, all put together, it is about sources of traditions and how they are spreading, and explaining the total. Unlike explaining a village, unlike explaining a tribe. Okay. So it is to this school L.P. Vidyardhi belonged. This is called Chicago School of Anthropology. So he belonged to the school of Robert Redfield, Mikem Marriott, and Milton Singer. And what did he do? He applied these concepts to see how certain pilgrimage centers are doing this function in India. He takes Gaya as an example and explains how Gaya is the center of that integration. So L.P. Vidyardhi is saying that these pilgrimage centers or religious centers are transmitting great traditions to various people across India, be it tribes and castes, and various groups. And not only that they are spreading, they are also receiving the traditions from the groups across India. So which means the pilgrimage centers are working as centers of integration. So Shastriya traditions are being transmitted and local traditions are entering the mainstream, and from the mainstream they are going into others. Local traditions will go to Gaya, and from Gaya it spreads like this. So LP Vidyardhi's work is about on pilgrimage centers. And here he coined this word sacred complex. He explained Gaya in terms of sacred geography, which places are sacred, sacred performances, what kind of rites are regarded sacred, and sacred specialists, the Brahmins who are performing these functions. All put together is called sacred complex. So, for example, in Gaya, there are Gayaval Brahmins. These are sacred specialists, and they do elaborate sacrifices to ancestral spirits. That's called Shraddha ceremony. How is this done? People from various places in India go to Gaya, and there they meet certain Brahmins who are supposed to have offered prayers to their ancestors traditionally. So this is a kind of a Jajmani relations all over. So it continues. So if a person goes today and there a Brahmin says that your grandfather came to my grandfather did this, and then before that, like that, it is a continuous process. So patrons from the India all over are connected to the Brahmins in Gaya, traditionally, historically, running into many generations. And particular rituals are performed. So this particular Brahmin will be performing these rituals to certain clients across India, which means these traditions are continued and passed on across generations. So Brahmins do these ceremonies, and the patrons will do financial help to the Brahmins, and they can finance buildings and do all kinds of help. And Brahmins make visits to the places where those patrons are there, which means there is a relationship not only when these people go to Gaya, but also when the Brahmins come from Gaya to these places where the patrons are staying. And a journey would take many days. So this is how things have been going on. LP Vidyardhi explained it in terms of Gaya, but many other anthropologists have taken different pilgrimage centers and showed how they have been integrating centers of Indian civilization. And they have also come across how these pilgrimage centers are spreading the diversity of faith also. For example, Saraswati in his 1982 studies on Kashi, he says that in Kashi there are Brahminic temples as well as non-Brahminic shrines coexist, which means Kashi is not transmitting one monolithic culture, Brahminic, non-Brahminic, and preset Brahminic temple are different from preset non-Brahminic temples. This shows that the pilgrimage centers are being influenced by diverse traditions, and pilgrimage centers convey in turn the traditions to others. So, L.P. Vidyardhi pioneered a particular way of study of Indian civilization, and many others followed. Many temples are studied to study how cultural continuity is produced and how diversity is accommodated. So that is one aspect of L.P. Vidyardhi's contribution. And another thing that L.P. Vidyardhi did is called nature man spirit complex. L.P. Vidyardhi is known not only for the sacred complex, but also for his contribution to applied anthropology. And in the applied anthropology, he gave this concept of nature man spirit complex. Nature man spirit complex refers to religion, and man refers to kin organization, family, marriage, kinship, and nature refers to technology, ecology. He used this in his study of Malays located in Rajmahal Hills, Bihar. They were doing khallu. Khallu is name for shifting cultivation. They were also doing fishing, hunting, and some doing flow terrace. Some are doing terrace agriculture also. So that was the nature component. And L.P. Vidyardhi studied kinship organization. He called it man component. He found that unusually there are no totemic clans, there is no village exogamy, and lineages are very short, only for 3 generations. But he doesn't explain why they are very short. And there are youth dormitories with very loose sex relations. He says to a Malay, sex is as inevitable, natural, and common as hunger. And he discusses political structure. Village community has a head, manzi, and group of villages also have a head called Sardar. So the point is, there is a technology component, there is a kinship organization or social organization, and there is a religious component. He says Malays have different kinds of spirits, benevolent spirits, malevolent spirits. Benevolent spirits are responsible for health, wealth, productivity in agriculture. Malevolent spirits bring sickness, abortions, death, natural calamities. and supervising all these spirits is one Gosayan. Okay, so his study, which he did when he was with Ranchi University, and he did this over many years, taking university students to this place, doing field work. He wanted to show in his book that nature, man, spirit are related. So these three are related. That these are related can be thought in terms of functionalism. Because functionalism is about interrelationship across traits. So LP Vidyardhi is following functionalism. That is one way of looking at it. LP Vidyardhi can also be seen as following cultural ecology. Because Vidyardhi's stand is that man is devising a culture in response to nature. And culture coming under ecological conditions is cultural ecology. And one cultural ecologist by name Julian Steward wrote preface to LP Vidyardhi's book. Okay, so this is cultural ecological approach, functionalism, and this is linked to applied anthropology because he wants to say that because cultural traits are interlinked, if you disturb one, other elements will be disturbed. So any developmental strategy, any intervention strategy has to take culture holistically. Because if you want to change, for example, shifting cultivation, they may not like it because shifting cultivation is linked to the religion. And in his study, he says various organizations, various activities of agriculture and various ceremonies related to family kinship are linked to religious activities in the world of spirit. So he is saying that this is a complex. Complex means interrelationship. So he is saying that they are integrated. He is also saying that this integration is coming because man is devising a culture in response to his ecology. Okay. But saying this theoretically is one thing, but explaining how is a different thing. Maybe that is more difficult. Why should religion be like this only given the ecology? Or why should lineages be only 3 given the ecology? So I don't think that the specific reasoning and logic is followed in LP Vidyardhi's work. Explaining, for example, causation and why this and why not that logic. I don't think that was followed in this book. But on the whole, this is considered a useful way of linking culture, which is seen as important in terms of working out what kind of intervention is possible in their culture and what would be the consequences of it. LP Vidyardhi is a pioneer in applied anthropology. So some of his books include Sacred Complex of Hindu Gaya, Malay Nature Man Spirit Complex in Hill Tribes of Bihar, Cultural Contours of Tribal Bihar, Applied Anthropology in India, Conflict and Tension of Social Trend in India, Tribal Culture of India, Rise of Anthropology in India, Trends in World Anthropology. So he's also a historian of anthropology, pioneer in applied anthropology, and then known for these two complexes, Sacred Complex and Nature Man Spirit Complex. So basically, he brought American School of Anthropology to explain Indian civilization. Not only these books, he wrote many more. He wrote all in all 21 books, co-authored 9 more. And 150 of his articles were published. Okay. So that is about L.P. Vidyardhi.